So this is the closing plenary for this year's Makeover Montgomery, and it will bring to close a weekend of presentations and discussions of economic, social, and environmental resiliency. Our purpose today is twofold. One, we will be hearing from our Planning Board Chair on the state of planning and our accomplishments and continued work to be done in Montgomery County. And two, we will hear from three nationally recognized architects on city building and the future of Silver Spring Transit Center here in Montgomery County. So first, let's get it going. Casey Anderson has been the chairperson of Montgomery County Planning of the Planning Board since 2014. It has been a remarkable term. Today, he will provide remarks on how we all, planners, architects, landscape architects, government officials, developers, and citizens need to continue to move forward into the future through design excellence and continued sustainable and equitable planning and parks development. How can we continue to make over Montgomery County? So please welcome today, Casey Anderson.
So I never thought I would say that planning is under-theorized. It's hard to imagine a field that is more intensively discussed and pulled apart and by academics and others. But I want to submit to you that there is sort of a crisis of, maybe not a crisis, but a vacuum of legitimacy in what it is we all do. And part of that's because of the legacy of planning's failures, the auto-oriented suburbs, racial and socioeconomic segregation, Cabrini Green, all the disasters that were done in the name of forward-thinking planning particularly in the 20th century. And I think that it's useful to try to think about what it is we're all trying to do here. And as Paul said, it's not just about planners, architects, it's civil engineers, real estate developers, public citizens of all types. Some of them are amateurs, some of them are professionals, but anybody who's engaged in this process, what is it we're trying to do, and how would we know if we're doing it right or we're getting anywhere? So one idea about planning is futurism. I just want to dismiss this quickly, but I think about it a lot because this is a page from the 1964 Wedges and Quarters Plan, and you can see the text. It's too early to predict the role that may be played by helicopters or other means of air transportation within urban areas, but the possibility of substantial role must be kept in mind. So I think about that today when we talk about self-driving cars and robots and AI and what has the pandemic done to us. One of the earlier speakers a couple days ago, early on in the conference, was talking about the effect of the pandemic, and I think made the same point, which is that instead of trying to respond to whatever's like right in front of us, or what the crisis of the day is, or the apparently disruptive trend, it's probably smarter to, instead of trying to predict the future, try to figure out how can we apply the ideas that have been successful over time in the face of changing economic, technological, social circumstances. So that one I think is easy. Maybe the harder one is design can save the world. And there's probably a lot of people in this room who've said that and believe that. Put me down for design may be necessary but not sufficient. And that's plenty important. I think that design can do quite a bit. But if we think about what is design trying to accomplish, I think that can kind of channel our efforts in a way that's more productive. And I don't think that I have any ideas here that are fundamentally at odds with the way that people in the relevant professions think about that, because I think everybody recognizes design has functional as well as aesthetic dimensions, and that we should be able to think about performance against specific criteria or objectives. I hope that's not too out of line or controversial, but I think nonetheless it should be maybe re-articulated or thought about in a slightly different way than the way I hear it said by many of the people who, like the people in this room and others that I encounter in our work. First object of planning should be social connection, I submit. And here's some data for you. I'm going to try to take it easy on the bar charts here, but I can't resist a little bit of this. From 1990 to 2001, the percentage of people who said they had no close friends other than relatives quadrupled from 3% to 12%. And you can see all the way up and down this chart, people are reporting they feel close to fewer and fewer people. Now, it's not just about the fact that you're probably not going to lead a happy and fulfilling life if you don't have very many friends. There's actually health effects. I've read that older people who don't have any close friends experience the same adverse health conditions or similar degree of adverse health outcomes as people who smoke two packs of cigarettes a day. So it has an acute and damaging impact on public health, not to mention people's happiness and well-being. Also, I think it's part of the problem with our politics. I mean, Donald Trump is probably a symptom, not a cause, of this long-term erosion of connection and the emergence of distrust in institutions of all kinds, not just government, but religion, labor unions, you name it. Robert Putnam wrote the book, Bowling Alone, bowling leagues, all of it. And I think that is caused by a lot of things. I don't think it's entirely the fault of the planning profession, maybe not even in a significant way, but if what we have built is this is desirable in many ways. I can understand why people find this appealing in certain respects. It's not really my style, but it's sold as sort of the ultimate valorization of privacy. We go to retreat to our end of a cul-de-sac and have our single-family home. We can drive in the garage, close the garage door behind us, and we don't have to deal with anyone else. And I get that. I admit that has appeal sometimes. Sometimes I'd like to just go home and get away from it all. But I think it neglects the effects of all these other social trends that have left us increasingly isolated from each other. Because another word, a positive connotation is privacy. A less positive word might be isolation. So not everybody wants to live like this, but we could at least try to build neighborhoods, design communities that physically facilitate closer interaction. I don't need to go through the bill of particulars here, porches, narrower streets, homes that are closer together. So you can have a measure of privacy, but it's not only not difficult to interact with your neighbors, but even if you don't choose to be close friends with the people who live immediately around you, at least you experience them, even in a casual way, walking down the street, going about your day-to-day business. You start to feel like you're more of a part of a community or a neighborhood, not as though you are in your pod locked down and locking everyone else out. At a minimum, I think we could probably do better with spaces, more spaces like this. And obviously, the planning profession and architects are not blind to the role of public spaces, but I hesitate to lean too hard on this because I think there's a kind of a tendency to try to put it all in parks and public spaces. And really, everything that gets built really should be built with the idea of facilitating healthy social interaction in mind. And that includes, walkability is part of it, but it's more than that. It's about creating not just opportunities, but ways in which people will encounter each other. And that has, I think, a democratizing influence as well as a psychologically healthy one. Physical activity is closely related. Don't necessarily need a sand pit for volleyball right in the middle of the city, but it wouldn't hurt if we tried that out once in a while. I think that many times plans are conceived by people who are a little bit they recognize the desirability of having active spaces and physical activity, but they're not particularly aggressive about it. They tend to design into urban areas places that maybe encourage a little bit of walking and bicycling perhaps, but maybe are reluctant to go one step further and say we should be designing communities in a way that really not just creates opportunities for more vigorous activity, but makes it irresistible, gets people off the couch. Programming, spaces that can do it, or at least something like this, a place that invites people to. It's not just about walking and biking or transit versus cars. It's about getting up and moving around. And obviously, I don't need to tell many of the experts in this room about the relationship between how buildings are oriented to each other and to the street, and et cetera, and their role in accomplishing that. I think last thing I want to highlight about this is just to say, often this discussion about absence of physical activity and health problems is tied to kids. We need to get kids off the couch, so they're not sitting around playing video games all the time. That's absolutely true, but only 30% of 25 to 64-year-olds get the federal government's recommended amount of physical activity daily. So this is not just about children or teenagers, it's not just about the elderly, it's about even young adults are physically inactive, and that's physically damaging. It's not good for mental health, and it also ties in, as I said, to the idea of social connection. I think we ought to be more explicit about that in thinking about our objectives for the places that we build. Second sort of set of issues, I'll say this is the third one, matching housing to households. I promise not too many charts, but this is another one's too good to resist. We have 3.5 times the proportion of households that consist of one person living alone today as we did in 1960. 3.5 times. 25% of households are just one person living by themselves. It was 7% in 1960. And conversely, we've had a dramatic decline in the number of households that consist of a married couple with school-aged children living at home. There's nothing wrong with that, but it is a fact that implies a physically different arrangement and configuration of living arrangements. And even as households are getting smaller, single-family houses are getting bigger. So it seems to me those are working at cross purposes. Why would that be? Well, it's because 36.7% of the land in the county is zoned for single-family homes. You can't really build much of anything else. In some cases, maybe some townhouses, but not really anymore. And you see about 2.3% of the land area of the county is zoned for multifamily. This is not really so much an argument about missing middle. I mean, yes, it's that too, but it's really a broader claim about the necessity of thinking about how much we've painted ourselves into a corner based on some assumptions about what kind of housing is going to be needed. Because even if we didn't have changes in household size, obviously the county continues to grow, and we need to figure out how to accommodate people in some reasonable way. And if you can't do anything but build a multi-bedroom house, that's just not going to match up very well with the needs of most, or at least a larger number of people. Some people live by themselves and want to live in a 5-bedroom house. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's trying to force anybody to live in a housing type that they don't want. But if we don't create more opportunities for a more diverse set of unit mixes, unit sizes, you're going to have not only all the problems that we talk about in terms of the equities of the issue and the accessibility of neighborhoods, you're just going to literally have a physical problem accommodating the actual households you have versus what was assumed 50 or 60 years ago. Inclusive growth. Some of you may have seen Ben Kraft's presentation earlier at the conference. I'm going to just give you a couple high points from that because I think it's so important. But if you didn't see it, we've got most of this up on our website. This basic idea is the blue areas are experiencing higher number of high and middle income households over the last 20 years, lower number of low income households. The red areas are the other way around, larger number of low income households. The people with more money are moving out. The green areas are experiencing inclusive growth, which is to say we have both economic and physical space such that there's more high-income and middle-income people, and there's also more low-income people moving in. That would be the ideal thing, that you could have growth that could make room for everybody. That's happening in a handful of census tracts, but it's more often that you're seeing either displacement on the one hand or the opposite problem, which is concentration of low-income households. And I don't have a lot of time to drill down on this, but since we're going to talk about Silver Spring later, I thought I'd show you what this looks like if you focus there. That census tract on the north is generally my neighborhood. I live there, Woodside, and you see there's been a limited amount of new development there over the last 20 years. It includes just a tiny piece of the central business district, so there is some sort of more intensive zoning allowed, but for the most part, you got single-family houses and that's it. And you see that's an area where you see displacement because as the area in and around downtown Silver Spring has become more popular, it's perceived as more desirable, more people want to live there. That's increased prices of those single-family homes, and there's fewer opportunities for lower-income people to live there. Same thing with East Silver Spring and that area to the south in the District of Columbia, Shepherd Park. That area on just to the west of the CBD includes the Falklands, and I think that was some low-income housing tax credit rehabs of some units, which created an opportunity for some lower-income people. That's not such a bad thing in this area because it's right there. It gives people access to all the things that makes Silver Spring such a center, not just of appealing amenities, but opportunities, transportation, jobs, and good schools, and all those sort of things. But the point here is that the green area, where we're seeing inclusive growth in downtown Silver Spring, has one thing that's not like those other census tracts, and that's a lot of new housing built. And I think we're often not very careful about rigorously analyzing what the effect of new housing development is. A lot of people assume that new housing, market rate housing comes in and poor people get shoved out. This data in this study, and specifically for downtown Silver Spring, but it shows it across the board in the DC area, the census tracts that have had the most housing development tend to be the ones where there's room for everybody. The places that are in demand that don't have new growth is where the price pressure is pushing lower income people out. And of course, the ones where people with money are leaving are in economic decline. They're not getting much development either, but for different reasons. This shows the overall numbers for the DC area as well as Montgomery County, and basically makes the same point, so I won't belabor that. The implication of this is we really should be thinking about socioeconomic as well as racial integration of neighborhoods as one of the main objectives we are trying to achieve with land use. It's not just about land use. It's obvious there's decisions about things like school boundaries and other decisions the government makes to create socioeconomically and racially integrated schools. But in Montgomery County, we have gradually seen the emergence of a very clear pattern where the more affluent white students are in one group of schools, and the less affluent people of color are in another group of schools. And there's almost a perfectly inverse relationship between the percentage of white students and the farms rate. That is to say, students who are eligible for free or reduced lunches. And we don't have time to get into this too deeply, but I just will say I think that's a problem. Environmental performance. This one, in some ways, is straightforward because we have a pretty good idea how to improve the environmental performance of a specific piece of land through the redevelopment process. I love to show this slide. It shows Pike and Rose before and after its redevelopment. You see it used to be this inline retail with a Bye Bye Baby and a La Madeleine and a pad site or two and a giant sea of asphalt. And today, it's not only got lots more stuff built there, but its stormwater performance and the general environmental performance is so much better, and you can just visually see how much that pops out as green. Well, that's great, but we haven't seen a whole lot of development even in White Flint, where the market is reasonably strong. Even Federal Realty sort of struggled to execute that against that plan, even after they'd done a lot of the basic infrastructure work on that superblock for Pike and Rose. And we just have seen a dribbling out of redevelopment, even in White Flint. And, this is a picture I took yesterday from my office window of the mall across the street. Probably, I would submit, one of the best things we could do for stormwater management and environmental performance generally in Montgomery County is see this mall redeveloped. But rents are in Wheaton, $2.25, $2.50 a square foot. They're actually not that far behind White Flint, but as I say, even White Flint is struggling to overcome the economic, to get to the hurdle rate where redevelopment could be justified. So I want to say one of our the things that we should be thinking about in land use regulation and planning is not thinking up so much new ways to ratchet up environmental standards. That would be great, but to figure out ways to make that economically viable, because 100% of nothing is nothing, and if we don't see redevelopment of these sites, you're not going to see stormwater management improvements, more trees, or any of the other things that people are looking for with very good reason because of climate change and just generally improving the quality of the natural environment as well as accommodating growth. The other problem here is that as far as everybody, I think, acknowledges, transportation, which is behind only buildings as a source of greenhouse gas emissions in Montgomery County, since we don't have a lot of extractive industries around here. So it's basically driving and energy use of buildings are what is producing emissions. Most employers are not located within walking distance of MARC or Metro. About 40% of federal jobs at government agencies in the county are within half-mile of Metro, 60%, so that means majority are not. And only about 30% of jobs at private sector employers are within a half-mile of MARC or Metro station. So we got to either extend the transit to where the jobs are or get the jobs to come near transit, probably some of both. One of the challenges with bringing the jobs to transit is there's just not that much developable land left next to the metro station. So that's probably there's about 6% of the land within a quarter mile of a radius of metro is suitable for redevelopment, meaning not only is, not to say that there's bare ground there, but there's a plausible economic case that redevelopment could occur. So that's not very much land to work with. Maybe that's an argument for bus rapid transit and extending transit outward, but it's also, I think, a reason to think about, even if you can't be near transit, it's not a binary choice. There are better and worse places to build stuff, even if it's not right next to Metro Rail or light rail or bus rapid transit. There's vehicle miles traveled per household is dramatically lower the closer you get to the core, the closer you get to the kind of mix of uses, where some, I guess the planner fashion these days call it complete communities, as we do in the general plan update, but you get the idea. If we can build more closer in, that's much better than dispersing it further out. Even if we don't have transit, you're still going to get very marked improvement in environmental performance of what gets built. So I always am self-conscious when I speak at events like this because my slides are never as slick as all the architects and design types who I know came before me and will follow, but I hope you'll find some of this interesting and provocative, and hopefully I've seen I cheated and looked at some of the presentations we're going to hear, and I think some of them actually do touch pretty directly on some of the things here, so I'm curious to hear what the panelists will have to say, and really appreciate your attention. Thank you.
The second portion of the talk today will feature three renowned nationally recognized architecture firms who the planning department provided a stipend for to render creative, futuristic, ideal visions for the Silver Spring transit area. Our goal was to stimulate and promote big ideas that are visionary, welcoming to all, and sustainable well into the future. The area is part of the updated Silver Spring master plan that we're currently working on and functions as a gateway. This area functions as a gateway to Montgomery County with multiple forms of transit all coming together at this one location. It's currently a bit of a mess, as you all know, but we wanted to see what might be able to happen one day in the future. The drawings, I hope, will stimulate a great deal of discussion on our use of big infrastructure and the future of our cities. So today, each presenter will take about 10 minutes to talk about their drawing specifically, and then I think we'll get into a discussion about what it means for the future of city building, and we'll open it up for some questions and answers. So first, well, let me introduce all three of them first. The first speaker today will be Robert Sponseller. He is design principal at Shalom Baranis and Associates in Washington, D.C., and has led the design of some of the most challenging, compelling projects in the city and region. His work includes master plans, multiple building projects, and individual buildings. His buildings involve both new construction and adaptive reuse in historic districts, and he has been recognized, and their firm has been recognized through numerous local, national, and international design awards, including the ULI Global Award for City Market at O Street in D.C. He has also designed several buildings in Montgomery County, including the Wilson and Elm in Bethesda, which we spoke about in one of our talks earlier today. And Robert is also on the Architectural Foundation Board at the University of Virginia. Our second speaker today will be Dan Kaplan, FAIA. And Dan is a senior partner at FX Collaborative in New York. Their city-based architecture, interior, and planning design firm. Dan serves in a design and leadership capacity for many of the firm's complex award-winning projects. Highly accomplished at creative, large-scale, high-performance buildings and urban designs, he approaches each project with the mission that it must elevate and resonate with the larger urban, cultural, and climatic totality. He has many notable projects throughout the world, including in our region here in DC and in the county. The third speaker today will be Matthew Bell, FAIA, and Matt is a professor of architecture at the University of Maryland and a principal at Perkins Eastman in Washington, D.C. His recent projects include Dunbar High School in D.C., a new dining commons at Catholic University that was just completed, and the Cleveland Park Library also in D.C. He has also done campus master plans at George Washington and American universities, and master plans for Macmillan in D.C., Barcroft in Virginia, and Brooklyn Manor RIA in D.C. Besides being a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, he is also a fellow of the Congress for New Urbanism. Matt also serves on the Historic Preservation Board at Washington, D.C. So with that, let me open it up to Robert. You have the pointer and the PowerPoint control, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. Lest anybody be worried, the stipend that Paul mentioned was a small s, not a capital S. So we embraced the...
Wait, you got money?
We're about to find out. We embraced the exercise wholeheartedly. We were honored to be invited and happy to join the visioning for Silver Spring. In just thinking about the exercise, I agree with Casey's points earlier that planning should look at what's worked over the past and not be too spontaneous and too specific of our time. But I will say that in formulating these ideas during the pandemic and during the tail end of the pandemic, hopefully I don't think it'll ever really leave, it was in our minds, and it drove one of our fundamental concepts in thinking about this site. You don't have to have too great of an imagination to imagine that our urban centers are under a lot of pressure. Most American cities are half commercial, half residential at best. So the fact that we've learned over the past couple of years to work, shop from anywhere, online, not necessarily in urban centers, just highlights a type of pressure that we think that our urban environments will be under, and it drove our thinking that the theme for this should include a healthful city center. So a healthful urban center was our main, healthy cities, healthful urban center. And there are three sort of aspects to that we wanted to dwell on. The first is embrace biophilic design principles. For those of you who are not familiar with biophilic cities, movements and such, they involve dramatic contact with nature throughout the day, throughout your working and living experience, and introducing nature into not only interior work environments, but as public spaces for all. It's part of our equity equation. In addition, it was about access and the public realm. It was the second theme for a healthy city, which meant that a clear, beautiful, well-designed series of streets that link up public spaces is fundamental to a healthy urban environment. And finally, it was about density. I sat through the affordable housing talk earlier, and we had discussions about it on our first panel about the economics of housing. And I've met some interesting young folks that are really focused on affordability of housing. And so providing at a site such as this, which is one of the real iconic transit sites, Silver Spring is a community that grew up on the rail, and now focusing this station redevelopment vision on the rail is appropriate. Providing that kind of density, well-designed density with these other characteristics in place for a healthful urban setting was our focus. And the density is critically important for housing cost and access and equity in those issues. So we don't really color within the lines usually when we're given a task. So true to task, we went beyond the station itself, because every story, every film, every theater needs not only a lead actor but a supporting actor. And so we expanded our thinking beyond the immediacy of the station itself when we included. Paul and Gwen didn't rope us in, so we included the districts directly adjacent to it because those support the transit station. And I think Our larger lens, if you will, is important when you think about Silver Spring's master plan that's currently going on, and the impact that the change that could really occur here in Silver Spring is quite dramatic. And so we thought it was appropriate to go beyond the station itself and to consider Dixon in addition to that. Paul, I'll try to stay within the 10 minutes. So our focus, and we actually provided two options, again, small s on the stipend. And the first option involves, in terms of the biophilia and the healthy cities theme, a dramatic, iconic green space or park over top of the existing station. It would be supported by a redeveloped street network and pattern along Dixon Avenue, and that would ultimately connect appropriately, I guess it doesn't show up on there. It would connect appropriately the station area itself, where the 1 and the 3 are, through Silver Spring to the neighboring districts. One of the most important things in urban centers is connectivity and circulation. And so you'll note in our plan that connections to the west, from the station to the west across the rail lines, was something that we thought would be very important and critical to link the area that is cut off from the transit lines on the west side into the center of Silver Spring. And we provide connections through to Ellsworth that are both visual and literal as you cross Georgia Avenue. So we brought that axis down literally into the red line down into Dixon Avenue. And, oh, there we go. There we go. The axis from Ellsworth and downtown Silver Spring coming down into the center along Dixon Avenue. And then a visual extension once you cross Georgia through to our new public plaza. So in this first option, we're proposing a large park above the station, an outdoor plaza that is suitably located and situated so that it gets sunlight throughout the day, and as part of this strong pedestrian aspect to our plan here on the western side of Georgia Avenue. And then a series of streets. We broke, the two existing parking garages that exist along Bonifant are eventually coming down. And so we're introducing new urban patterning that is much smaller in scale, much more porous, and allows for, again, this very important circulation across and throughout the district, connecting the park up to the adjoining neighborhoods. So to focus on these two key areas in our first option, on the left is the park. This is about 2.5 acres in size, this green space. It could serve all types of green amenity spaces, recreation, if anybody wanted to do gardening, et cetera. Educational facilities could exist in the green space as well. Is the centerpiece of this first proposal here above the station. You can see it in plan. The purple line comes in from the west and continues down Bonifant Street. That is the county's master plan. And the park sits above the kiss and ride in the station, accessed directly from Colesville Road, from the new green connection to the west, and then vertically from these pavilions that we're locating on the north and south sides of the site. You get a view of it from the north looking south here, directly looking kind of southwest from the new buildings that are proposed in this view, and then aerially here at the top. The second area of focus for us was Dixon Avenue itself. We thought, streets are the critical link between communities and amenities, and so we developed a very unique formal guideline for Dixon Avenue. You can see here on the lower right that one of the interesting aspects of Silver Spring are these existing historic buildings that are kind of smaller in scale. And so keeping that history on the site and the new development, acknowledging that scale, and shouldering the buildings down to create a very comfortable walking environment through that design approach lets Dixon Avenue, I think, be a memorable destination in its own right, and as an appropriate supporting actor role to the public park to the west. And it also just allows the history of Silver Spring to live on. We designed a building, full disclosure, here in the center of Dixon Avenue, and one aspect of the site is its eastern half, which is a lower scale building. Oh, you can't hear me? Okay. Is this better? Okay. So we thought that Dixon should maintain this kind of interesting pedestrian-focused, lower-scale characteristic in its development and become a unique urban pattern and form that would be very pedestrian-oriented and appropriate and build on its legacy and then support and complement the green space, the public plaza space, in weaving these two things together. We stayed a little further away from the specifics of architectural style and skin and cladding than some of my colleagues did. We focused more on the overall public realm and physical form of Silver Spring. This next slide highlights some precedent difficult parks from around the world. This will be a difficult park because it is located above a transit station. We're working on Burnham Place in Washington, D.C. today. Some of you have seen the High Line in New York and Hudson Yards, and it is possible to build amenities above transit. These are some examples from around the country and around the world. So on the left upper left is in Dallas, where a park has been constructed above a freeway system, Clyde Warren Park. These are also references in terms of the scale of the open space that we're proposing. So at 3 acres, we're at about 130,000 square feet, roughly, of space, which puts us very close to the Seville mushroom, if anybody has seen that and been there in terms of overall scale. And not too far off from the Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, if you all are familiar with that space. Other examples in Seattle, this is a monumental outdoor space that connects the water to the city in the Olympic Sculpture Park, which weaves over top of a freeway system as well. The German example is a scale reference, although the building is quite interesting with biophilic glazing and plantings on its exterior skin. And then, of course, the Trans-Bay Center Elevated Park in San Francisco. Many of you have probably been there and experienced that. That's a little bit larger, almost 1.5 times. And then for scale from France, you always have to reference Paris. La République is about 140K, so it's very close to our scale overall in terms of the size that the park would be in construction. Now, I believe there's a video that, and so this is a view, before we go to the video, this is a view looking, again, from the west, and you get a sense of the overall urban form. Again, additional blocks that are there today. So more grain for building our buildings, and the buildings are a little more, if I can use the term, unisex, meaning they're flexible. They don't have to be office, they don't have to be residential, they don't have to be hotel. The infrastructure is thinner, taller, and more flexible for our urban resiliency. We don't know what the future holds for our urban centers. And so building as much flexibility into our infrastructure is important. I have clients that call me every day and ask, can we convert this office building into a residential building? And I tell them no, because it's too deep, it's too wide, it's too tall, you'd have to rebuild the building from ground zero. So I think you'll see an architectural approach that is more flexible over time, taller ceilings generally, less deep floor plates overall in our urban construction. And here you also get a sense in this view of the very interesting stepping and acknowledgement of scale on the Dixon Avenue characteristics. So the idea is this form and this pedestrian street network supports the park as the focus of the plan. This was our first option, and I think this is the video, which hopefully this will work. Let's see, or maybe somebody can tap. Oh, there we go. Okay, here we are. Now, can I stop it? It's just going to run through. Here we are looking at the park from the south. Oh, I can stop it. Okay, let me go back. Okay, let's try again. Practice makes perfect. Okay, here we are coming from the south. Let me just pause it. There you get a sense. The rail line is on our page left, paralleling the main open area. We've proposed 3 or 4 buildings that are oriented, again, for light and access in visual view corridors on the north side and on the east side of the park, so it gets ample sunlight. Coming from the south, I'll pause it at poignant moments. There's a good view. Looking down on the overall plan, you get a sense of the outdoor plaza. Outdoor spaces always need architectural support, programming support for them. If they're isolated on an island, on an urban island, or away from urban fabric, they tend not to be thriving and vital. And so you can see here, we scaled down the buildings and shouldered the buildings to provide uses along those 3 edges that define the space. Okay, I won't pause it again. I'll let it go this time. So the park aerially, and then we'll shift over. Watch that building. We'll shift over and look. Here's the vista that's coming from Ellsworth Avenue that continues into the public space. We thought was very important. And then there's Dixon Avenue. I wish I could pause it there, but you get a sense of what a unique character that could be on Dixon Avenue with the shouldered buildings and the leveraged outdoor space. And here we are at the end. The immediate impact is smaller buildings, smaller blocks, more walking areas, connectivity throughout the park district to Dixon, and to the larger neighborhoods beyond. So that's our first option. I'll just very briefly do the second. Is that okay? Go faster. Okay. Paul says go faster. So the next option was we knew that there might be an economic equation which could help the economics of providing a park. And so we thought, let's put, as an idea, let's put out there the idea of an iconic structure, a region-wide tallest structure in the Washington, D.C. region that could be incentivized for construction on the site through additional density and height, and could help pay for the park itself. And I'm just going to go right to the movie for this idea. In thinking about this, since we did the original proposal, one of the other parcels could be given the height and the density to pay for the parks. You could actually take the first idea of the large park and the second idea of the tower, put them together, and have an economic way to pay for the construction of the park. So in this scheme, the only difference is the presence of a tower, again, located in such a way that the light comes into the plaza and the park from the south. That tower could actually be located on any of these neighboring parcels to incentivize this construction overall. So I'll go right to the film for this one, and here we go. And so now you can see this is about 600 feet tall. I hope that's the tallest in the region. It should be close. It has a smaller south public space, and then a view from the Ellsworth axis that we think is very important, stepping back. Dixon Avenue again, and we'll end with a vista of the tower. There we go. Okay, that's our proposal.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for sticking around. It's not that nice out, so don't worry about it. You're not missing anything. And I just want to thank Montgomery County for inviting us to this dance. I think it's just a wonderful exercise that you've really sponsored. It's wonderful. So our proposal is called the Emerald Plateau, and it's really about revisioning the heart of Silver Spring. So here it is today. It's perfect. I don't know why we're spending our time, but this is literally the red line stop when you get off from the district. And yes, there's some nice stuff up over the hill, but between here and there, it's I would say it's a level 11 parkour course. It's quite tough. Reimagining this and to be a forward-looking, wonderful place to be, a heart, a center, a place is really was our charge. And we thought of this, when Paul and Gwen asked us to do this, we really thought of our assignment, our charge as having two aspects. One is a sort of planning aspect, which is sort of unraveling this Gordian knot of the snarl of infrastructure and circulation and development, but also a part of it was a visioning. I mean, I really enjoyed the chair's talk and the first slide from the 1964 plan, and you had the cool monorail. I mean, part of what our charge we felt was to create that type of drawing. What could something be like 20 years hence at the heart of Silver Spring? What would be the emotion of it? So on the left is sort of let's say the mind, and on the right is the heart, or the left is the left brain, the right is the right brain. So you understand. So what you're going to see is in the overlap in the green. So here it is today in plan. So first we're going to go through the Gordian. How do we untangle the Gordian knot? I think Robert's scheme and this scheme actually has a lot of nice overlaps. But that's the red line. This is the purple line. This is what I call the penguin piazza here, where the penguin sculptures are when you come out. So again, between here and here, quite tough. You can see the sort of graining and intensity of the infrastructure. So our plan, which you see here, this is the red line. Two major moves. One is to engulf, encapsulate, create a green terrace, a green hill that, over the transit center, so that we really take that and encapsulate it, and that gives us a chance to rework some of the circulation and create development pads at its perimeter. So that's in here. And the second is increase the east-west porosity, the east-west connection, especially along Bonifant Street, which we see as crucially important and a really interesting approach. So just in plan, that is you're looking down sort of as a perspective, and you'll see this a little bit more in a moment. Underneath this pedal here is the entrance plaza, and by reworking the bus access, we get a continuous pedestrian route up this great space, which we see as a hybrid between park and piazza, if you will, something that's activated, actually not that different from what you see right out the windows here. 4 development sites, by taking Ridley and Ramsey and connecting them through. We created this as a spot for an iconic moment, an iconic tower, similar to what Robert had said, with something that really marks this really important moment on the skyline of the region. And then a civic loggia space that is sort of a hybrid between landscape, architecture, art, civic infrastructure lining the edge. So I would also, taking the purple line, and as it transforms into more of a street-oriented rail, treating Bonifant as this really interesting hybrid of semi-covered street, shopping street, restaurant row, covered transit zone, place where people live, like really creating that as a new model of a street. So the second part, so that was sort of the general planning framework. The second part of this is the vocabulary, the architecture, what sort of being speculative about what it could be like. And so some of the ethos of what we wanted to convey in the drawings were, connected and dense, something that was part of this 15-minute community. 2, blurring of uses. This has been talked about a lot. Work, shop, live, learn, play, all blurred, not separate. Get in your car and go from one to the other. Third is this is actually a typo. It should say carbon negative construction, but we're just positive about taking some carbon out. A little over enthusiasm, but really using. I think we are going to 20 years hence. I mean, between now and then, there's just going to be this increasing drumbeat of embodied energy, reducing embodied energy, timber construction, low energy construction, highly efficient on-site waste to energy and reuse. Second to last, Robert talked about biophilia. This is very similar. This is emerging. We wanted to convey a merging of architecture and landscape. So you're sitting in, Silver Spring and Montgomery County has a history of where, trying to take the best of the city and the best of the country and merge it. And, maybe 1 or 2 generations back, the vision of that was suburbia. What we're positing here is a sort of a new hybrid where you can have the benefits of that single-family house, but also have the benefits of ample green space in the city. Finally, we think there's an opportunity to do public art, not just as like a plaza with a thing in it, or a overpass that has a nice little arch, but something that is at the scale of the district, at the scale of the city. So that's what we wanted the renders to convey that. So we're going to show it to you in 2 ways. One is a more polished rendering, and the other is a sort of more sketchy video. And so what you see here, this is the red line. You're looking south towards the district. The first thing you'll see is that we've taken the red line as a way to create energy and stormwater retention. It's there already. Let's use it. The Piazza of the Penguins down here is reorganized, so when you come out, there is a place. By putting the buses further up Colesville, we're able to make a welcoming spot. When you get off that, it's very clear. Then Wrapping up is this sort of ravine that takes you up into this new plateau. You can see that we're using landscape metaphors and greenery. The 4 buildings that are arrayed with the tallest one, and that, all of these in timber construction with greenery interspersed at every level, not just at grade, but really winding its way up so that there's vitality and greenery and connection to nature throughout the building, totally infused. This is the great green space, piazza space. You can see a little bit of Bonifant. I'll show you that in a moment with this sort of parasol cover, if you will, going down. And then these petals here, these roof structure, the idea was to create, as you come in from on the red line, this hybrid of art, of landscape, of civic infrastructure. And then, of course, there's some sort of dialogue between that and that. So now I'm going to show you, so that this is this is a type of polished renderings that, convey one way to do it. We also wanted to show something that, how you move through the space and create, there's a program that we've been working with, software called Mental Canvas, which allows you to do sketches and then sort of render them, videoize them or make them move. So that's what this is. So here you see, hopefully it'll start moving. The purple line, the red line, we're coming in on the train. Here now you can see under the PVs, you see that big place, the art, the landscape, actually the bikeway, down into that plaza. And you really can see how you got up to the terrace. Colesville with more green infrastructure in the street. The purple line overhead, and then up the ravine, if you will, which would all be like a constructed landscape, where the purple line stops, activated plaza, sort of amenity space in the sky with greenery, looking down Bonifant with its, I'm going to come back and do it one more time, a little slower. The Kiss and Ride, which I guess we'll still need those with robots. And then here we go again. Back out and into the rendering. So I'm just going to do it one more and pause on a couple of places, and then I'll be done. So I guess I can go back and then hit, no, yeah. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, if you can just go ahead, and I thank you very much, by the way. A little forward. So one area I think is very important to look at, and if you can stop right around here would be great. So, and maybe a little bit, just a tiny bit further, but yeah, right around. So this was the same shot that I just showed you before from the photograph. So what you're seeing here is this layering of infrastructure, of movement, of greenery, of public art, so of the architecture beyond, if you can go forward now. And then it really all coming together. And then another stopping point right around here would be great. Oh, I guess not. Yeah, I think it's like 45. Around, yeah, good. Yeah, that's great right there. So here you can see sort of the entrance to the metro here, some sort of great art piece, this sort of really interesting civic edge, the 2 stairs coming up, this sort of constructed landscape. And if you just go ahead, let it play now, and we'll go to the next stopping point. I love how the underside of the purple line is purple in the sketch. If there's anybody from WMATA here, we could love to figure out how to make that happen. So the other thing we really wanted to convey here, and you can stop almost about right now, is, thank you, that's great. This sort of hybrid between urban life and nature, so activation of the plaza space or the public space with retail and active spaces and maker spaces, but spilling out into something that's quite green and then terracing up. And if you go to the next, go ahead a little bit. I mean, I think the other really interesting moment in this is right around here, stop. And, you know, taking that sort of ground plane and civic space and communal space and not just keeping it ground or maybe the second floor, but really wrapping it up into the building itself where, you know, the idea of the dream of a suburban backyard could be reinvented in the middle of the city here. That's a place where you can, you know, sort of like the vertical version of that slide that was shown earlier of the backyards with the porches. You could go ahead and almost done. And there we go. So Bonifant, and if you can stop right around here. Oh, no. It's almost, you know, it's like a minute. Yeah, there you go. Thanks. And so Bonifant, the idea, that's great. Thanks. So the idea, you know, art at the scale of the district, the idea is to create this amazing parasol space, who knows what it'll be, but just sort of a sunshade, could be photovoltaic, but that really creates this sort of hybrid space of that is sort of plaza, street, transit infrastructure, gathering space, bracketed on either side by residential or commercial space. And then if we can just finish it out, that would be great. So as it's going, I just, again, want to reiterate what we're looking at here is something that sort of sets the vision forward, you know, a decade, 2 decades, really takes into account density, integration of greenery and urbanism and art at a really integrated scale for this really important part of your county. So thanks, and I look forward to the conversation.
I don't have a movie. I'm sorry. Those were great. So, Matt Bell with Perkins Eastman. One of the things that's really important about a project like this is something that we talk about in our office all the time, which is that one of the most important roles of any piece of architecture is to define the public realm and to make the public space that defines the city. And clearly, obviously, there's a challenge here in Silver Spring. But what's nice about this particular exercise was it sort of aligned well with a lot of the things we try and teach our young people who come work for us, and also, you know, how we practice, whether it's the smallest building or interior or a large master plan. What was also nice about this assignment was we threw it open to all the young people in the office, actually everybody in the office, and they all came in with their sketches and their ideas. And actually, what was very gratifying to me was that there was something of every scheme of all the different teams that worked on it that showed up in the final product, which was really sort of an amazing thing. It doesn't always work out that way. But really, it's you know, so many of the things my colleagues have touched about are things that we've embraced as well, which I think are things that the county should really take forward. I think this question of biophilia and green space is very, very important. Connectivity, obviously, is very, very essential here. Placemaking is very, very important. So I'll just walk you through what our thoughts were. I will say this, Paul and Gwen's initial charge to us was to make an aerial view of what this place would look like in the future. But the problem with that, of course, is that the world is experienced at ground level. So, you know, making aerial views are okay, but what you really want to understand is what's it like down at 5 feet 5 inches off the ground. So we've tried to show some of that with some of the drawings we've made as well. You know, there it is. If there was ever a poster child for a makeover, I think this is probably the place. Probably makeover is probably too light a word. Probably, I don't know what you would say, you know, sort of major surgery, I suppose, is required here. But it is a significant opportunity. And one of the things that I think is always important when you're dealing with an urban design is to really try and understand what the issues are and what are the issues that define the problem. Because what we talk about in the office is don't start designing just yet. Most architects can run off and knock microphones over, but can make pretty pictures. But unless you're really solving the problems as they've been defined, it just becomes just a pretty picture. So we spend a lot of time talking about what the issues are, and it seems like this photo, aside from, shows a lot of them. Obviously, the ugliness and the gargantuan nature of the transit center is a major issue, and you have to deal with that. It's there, it's not going anywhere, and to a certain degree, it's a great thing. Even though it's ugly, it's great to have this transit center that brings all these things together. Another thing that's an issue there is the grade change. There's at least a 3-level grade change from the upper part of the site down to the station, and that's very, very important to take that into consideration, because the topography plays an important defining role in what this place is like. The third thing, I think, is that there are significant redevelopment opportunities in and around this area. Obviously, you can see some of them here, and my colleagues have taken advantage of a lot of those in a very nice way. But there's probably some buildings here tall buildings that may not be here in the future. We've seen people redevelop things, and there certainly is a number of redevelopment sites. And when we walked the site with Paul and Gwen said, don't forget, show redevelopment sites. We want to make sure people understand that there's the possibility for redevelopment, so that's very important. Another important thing is Colesville Road, and we spent a lot of time talking in our office about what does Colesville Road want to be? It's a very, very difficult problem. It's not the Champs-Élysées, it's not a place, even though it's wide like a lot of those major boulevards, a lot of the decisions that are made over the course of time have not helped it. I mean, for example, the side of the Discovery Building, which is about as blank and as mean as it could possibly be. So we wrestled a lot with this question of Colesville Road. Do we make everything face it, not? And then we started to talk about where Silver Spring is growing, and we started to focus more and more both about making connections to downtown, but also to Ripley, where there's an immense amount of, or immense, maybe not the right word, but there is a significant amount of redevelopment going on there, and also the potential of those garages up here to be sort of gateway things. So we were starting to define it, and clearly, the other thing that we came to is there's no there, and there's very little there in Silver Spring. The downtown project with the Civic Center is fabulous. I think that's turned out to be a big success. But there aren't a lot of great hangout spaces other than that. Maybe there's a handful. So it really needs a sort of idea of a space that is there that has some great placemaking. So the architecture has to do that. So there's the aerial, there's the monster there, and the purple line there. One of the things we looked at as well that you'll see is we've taken a suggestion about the street system. We think Wayne maybe doesn't need to go all the way through across Colesville. We think that there's some opportunities to rethink that, which would give us a little bit more flexibility in and around the transit center site. There's the parking garages, which are enormous, and I've never seen anybody above the 3rd floor parking on those decks. I don't know, maybe some of you park up on the roof because you like the view, but it's just, they're empty for the most part, and they seem to have outlived their usefulness. So as my colleagues have proposed, they should be seriously considered for redevelopment. The other thing I think it's important to say, I think these are county-owned, is that right? They're county-owned? Those really are great development sites, but this land here as well is county-owned there. And the other thought we had was the new park going in here, Gene Lynch Park. I feel very bad for Mr. Lynch that park is going to be named after him. I don't think it's a great place for a park up next to Colesville Road. I think there are much better ways to do that. And so what we've proposed is to add that into the site for the redevelopment there. And then this is the 3D model that Paul and company sent us. And one of the things that's interesting about Silver Spring, which is what we see characterized by a lot of transit-oriented development projects throughout the world, is that there's density without urbanism. In other words, there's a lot of density, there's a lot of people there already, but there's no sense of kind of connectivity and placemaking. And it is a problem. A lot of our planning today, we think the knee-jerk reaction is, well, if we just put density at the transit site, that'll be good. Well, yeah, that's okay to do, but you really need to make that buildings shape the space so that people want to be there. It's not simply enough to do it in a quantitative way. You have to do it in a qualitative way as well. So one of the things we always try to do is make a places diagram. here, and this is the sort of, it's a little complicated, but I'll explain it. There's the purple line going through here. We've made a sort of terraced garden in the center there that resolves, we hope, the level change between this upper level that is more or less the Ripley and Georgia Avenue level down to the transit area, and taking advantage of that slope in a way that it can also treat stormwater and sort of have a natural sort of contour of the land. We have changed Wayne and Second here. Here's the old alignment of it. Here we have sort of taken, what's the name of that street, Paul? Ramsey. We've straightened Ramsey out here. And the benefit of that is, number one, by straightening it out here, we get a much better development parcel, Gwen, by the McDonald's there, okay? So we get a much better development parcel there. And we think we get a much larger site to build something really beautiful and memorable at the intersection of all these things. We're proposing a hotel winter garden. And I think one of my colleagues talked about not having specific uses named for the buildings. I think in general that's correct. Things will happen as the market happens. But we do think a hotel here that animates it would be a good choice. The buses come out here, but Silver Springs, the county seems to like to put buildings over the top of transit areas like at the library, so why not do it there? And we get a development site in that location there. Gwen talked to us a little bit about the county's idea about a performing arts center. We think if this block here at this major intersection here between Bonifant and Wayne gets redeveloped, that would be a really good location. It's about the same size block as the Anthem at the Wharf. We did the master plan and the design for that block, which has the 6,000 person theater in the center of it, so it does fit very, very well in there. And then what we were trying to show is that this part really is a nexus of a lot of different connections. And that the city, yes, there's been a lot of development this way, but we think that there's very, very important connections, and I think my colleagues have picked up on this, towards Ripley and this area of Georgia Avenue, so that having a urban space that begins to sort of inflect in that direction and allow for people to make those kind of connectivities is very, very important. Above the Kiss and Ride, we have a solar farm. We think it's a great place for a kind of iconic bike shed there. These could be tall buildings. We obviously haven't designed the buildings. They should be obviously shaped to provide sunlight at the ground, but also get some density in there as it gets redeveloped. And also, we thought that since this area is very tall here, high up, that we could have a walkway along the top that we call the terrace that could almost maintain the upper level of Ramsey so that those folks wouldn't be going down, and it could take you around this garden here and avoid some of the pedestrian bus conflicts that happen today, which are pretty significant there. So we thought that that was a real opportunity to make a space, a multi-level public space. So this is a diagram of that. You can see this is the terrace, which is this loggia building, has a little double-level coffee shop there, so you can go up there and get ice cream and coffee and hang out here. You can see the connection to Wayne here in the Discovery Gardens there. This is the hotel with the winter garden here. We proposed a large loggia that would be able to walk to get to the Purple Line station here, or you could come through the gardens that way. We have a rooftop pool of the sort where you could look up in the winter garden and see the bottom of the pool and see people splashing around. We think that would be fun. And in general, put a public face to Colesville without actually locating significant uses there, but really use this loggia to kind of define the space because it's very, very wide as it is today. So this is a view of what that looks like here. That's the big public loggia. It's very theatrical sort of form, intentionally so, with an upper level walkway that slips under the Purple Line and comes down the stairs here to a small retail thing here and places for public art. Along that, the hotel and its pool on an upper deck still permit the buses to go through here. And this is below that, the winter garden with the loggia that leads up to the Kiss and Ride at the upper level there. And you can see it from the other end here, coming down Wayne here, and sort of these two pieces sort of welcoming you and framing the view in, and then this terrace garden as it steps down into the hillside. And we've tried to include, places where we think solar collectors and things, and also there'll be stormwater gardens at the bottom of this as well. So you can see another view from on top of the station there. And this is a view if you were on the terrace, the walkway here, and you could walk over this way to get to the Purple Line station. This is a view showing that terrace, the promenade here, the sort of winter garden, because it's very, very important. In our work, we try to imagine what a public space is like throughout the year. It's not just in the good weather, but on a rainy day, you know, if you're hanging around Silver Spring, is there a nice place to go to that you can be and still enjoy the public space? And a view looking back the other direction there. A view from further along the terrace here at Ramsey, going up that way, there with the hotel tower. And then a view down more or less at grade, close to grade here, where we have the steps up to inside the Gateway Garden, up to the Purple Line, the station there. You can see lots of different activities. Could be a place for concerts, could be a place for formal ceremonies and things. We thought of making it green, not just for biophilic reasons, but the plaza at the Civic Center is very hardscape, and we thought that this would be something different, and therefore might have a sort of iconic role to play as well. We think about places that are like Bryant Park, which is green there. So, and then some views there showing a little bit more detail of what that stuff is like. And then the last view, Paul's about to stand up here. Could you? Yeah. Last view, what it would be like actually sitting in the space and enjoying a nice day in this terraced amphitheater. Could have an event, could have a concert, or you could just go there and have a picnic lunch with your buddy. So.
So three pretty interesting and wild solutions to a very significant site, but a site with a lot of issues. I'll just open it up for questions and answers. We only have a few minutes left, but if anybody wants to ask a question, sure.
I sat here thinking about why would I get on the Purple Line to come there? Now, most of your presentations had to do with assuming that people lived there, they were coming home from work and going to jobs. And I kept thinking, I don't live there. Why would I come here? And I was taken by Chairman Anderson's comments this morning, his picture of the people playing sand volleyball. And I kept thinking, wow, how about if Silver Spring in this area became the pickleball headquarters and we had pickleball tournaments and I would come on the Purple Line for pickleball tournament. But I come on. So I was taken, I think what you were told was green and green and green. I'm wondering if anybody's ever thought about active sports like pickleball or like tennis court, or I see all these people and they're all watching something and I want a sport activity there to happen for them to watch. That's all.
I think any good public space could probably, I mean, we drew it one way, right, you know, to show it, but that's a great suggestion. I mean, if this project became real, one of the things you'd want to do is program the public space, and people talk about both things that are fixed and things that are flexible, and you'd want to be able to sort of make sure that you included places where those sorts of changing activities could occur.
I don't know if I need the mic here, but I'd like to comment architecture to improve the public realm. I think that was all three presentations were excellent, but I thought that was very important. This conference in general is more about our intent, what we're trying to achieve, where in the past maybe we've been more physical, where the roads go and where things go. But again, this just comments on this particular area. Would be the parking lot district was set up in 1947, and it was a showcase for the country of how you deal with it. It's Wheaton, Silver Spring, it's Bethesda, and then it's Montgomery Hills. But it could be a tool to perhaps, where you're talking about less driving, a little bit of that, it may be something that could help fund a project in this particular area. Kind of restructuring what some of that parking lot district, I guess it's set up in our legislation from 1947. The other thing, we had a good hotel, excuse me, coming in at the corner of Georgia Avenue in Colesville, but the problem was the disconnect of the WSSC system. And they were, I guess, as I understand it, wanting to be charged for much more. But that's another element. We look at the Purple Line going to now 2026, But for this project to move ahead, maybe the parking lot districts could be a tool for implementing some of these ground activities, not all of the burden on the developer, so to speak, and then looking at, again, the WSSC, restructuring the ability to provide the water and sewage resources that are needed for this to function. Some of that will be changing over time, technology, but again, those would be two areas to look at, how the parking lot district could help and what can be done with WSSC. But beautiful presentations.
Yeah, I think that all three examples here, proposals, you can actually see, I mean, Dan, you probably had the most detail, if you will, on architecture in the vision, but I think all three of them were very much focused on, not only how do we create sort of porosity to link through streets, to link this area to the greater part of Silver Spring, but also, how to make those streets actually the public spaces of the community, and then also using the streets to link the public spaces, not only at the Metro Center, but throughout the site. So I think it's very clear the public realm is the element that pretty much weaves each of these three schemes together. So I think that was a very important aspect, and we didn't really necessarily ask for green or anything specifically. I think it was more of a vision, and I think all three of these firms are very high quality firms and understand that the public realm is probably the most important element when you do design.
We find that the uses change and the market changes and things, but if you get the ground level right, you've done a lot. I mean, my partner Stan Exta designed Inner Harbor East in Baltimore at 3 and 4 stories, and if you've ever been up there, you know that there's much taller buildings there, but the actual imprint of the urban spaces remains, and it's very nice. It's actually probably even better with taller buildings, so it's really important to get those first couple of floors correct in how they define the public space.
Also, I just want to add about, the comment, it's sort of trying to bring the 2 or 3 comments together. The reason to come to Silver Spring, I think, is in these visions, is the public realm, there's a public space to go to, a park place, great streets. That's what, when you create high-rise or denser development to make it work and to make it a place, you need to really invest, and not just money, but imagination into the public realm, and that's what makes it tick. That's what makes it really work, to create a real destination.
I think Silver Spring is also sort of really critical for the larger region because it is currently one of the affordable options in the metropolitan area. So maximizing, let's say, efficiently utilizing our available densities through the right street network, the correct heights, will further strengthen that role. And supporting all of that in an ideally planned and designed public realm is critical to achieving other goals beyond just beautiful public spaces, but living near transit and living affordably in the region.
I'm walking around with the mic, another question.
Thank you. So I appreciated that all the schemes explored a different way of connectivity around a general open space for the public realm at a macro level, but I was also curious if you all, while investigating these ideas, also thought about how they would connect, again, on the ground level, but to the smaller scale shops and restaurants that are north of Colesville, and how you would imagine people would be using this space in conjunction with those spaces. Or do you envision smaller scale commercial spaces surrounding this area?
I mean, the only thought that we had was that, the scale of the uses should be small enough that there's a variety, And it's not we didn't see this, I don't think any of us saw, but we certainly didn't in our sketching and so forth, see it as like a big interior retail environments. We saw it as something that, that the sort of grain and scale and activity on, especially on Bonifant and, the connector and also surrounding those public spaces would be, of a finer grain. But I honestly think that it sort of less important as the scale of the spaces, as the fact that they were outwardly looking and really reinforcing the public space.
One of the,
No, go ahead, Matt.
well, one of the challenges of redevelopment is the size of building floor plates and the size of them, of the footprint at ground level. So if you look at old downtown, which is Georgia, along where Plaza Art is, and there's an Ethiopian restaurant, things like that over there, the cadence of retail is narrow. Their retail fronts, they're narrow to the street and deep to the block. And they developed over time as like 25-foot increments and things like that. And many great retail districts have that scale, because you can walk past a lot of stores in a very short period of time, and it adds vibrancy, right? So one of the challenges anytime when you're looking at redevelopment, and one of the points I think Robert made, which I think is a good one, is looking at the scale and making things smaller. It's oftentimes very more difficult to make things smaller, because when you make big buildings, unless you have some artificial way to get lots of different retailers in the base of the building, the commercial leasing agents want to lease it up to the fewest number of entities as possible. So if you have a 10,000 square foot floor plate, they don't want to divide it up 5 times and have to deal with 5 leases, right? And so they find one tenant for 10,000 square feet. That's not a great recipe for great streets. So one of the things you might start looking at as you think about the redevelopment of Ripley or other places in Silver Spring is, where are the places where you need that smaller scale frontage there that makes good public retail environments? Where is it essential to have that? And where are places where that's less possible? And maybe there are some decisions to be made about the kind of zoning and the design guidelines you write and things like that. But it's like if you compare in DC Van Ness to Cleveland Park, right? Cleveland Park has a lot of little stores. It's a much nicer environment. Van Ness has big floor plates, right? It's just not as much fun to walk around there. So I think that's something, as something like this begins to be planned, you need to think about.
What will be uniquely particular to this area is the way that parking is handled on these redevelopment projects. Parking is a big economic driver in redevelopment, and Silver Spring has a challenge of burying all the parking, which is the ideal scenario. We don't really dictate, so creatively integrating the parking in some above grade functions is going to be one of the challenges for the development teams. Hopefully it'll all be below grade, we don't know. The retail environment today, I know we're supposed to be looking ahead 20 years, but if you think of the next 5 years, I think the large format retail is sort of disappearing, and you're seeing more micro, smaller, creative, local retail anyway because of the economy, which is but maybe a nice thing in terms of your question about small-scale retail. We thought that embracing a smaller scale to address the streets proportionally to the pedestrian was important, and also given the history of smaller, historic, kind of nice old buildings in Dixon would help develop an area and a district which was unique to Silver Spring and to the Ripley Triangle. So that was part of our Dixon Avenue strategy.
One last question here, Ralph.
I've lived in or near Silver Spring since 1946. And as an advocate for the Purple Line, I recall a moment when the Purple Line was first designated as a possible project, and someone running for lieutenant governor said, "Who would want to go to Silver Spring?" So I'm delighted to see these presentations because you show clearly why one would want to go to Silver Spring. There's plenty already, but you've made it much clearer for us. Thank you.
That's it. Great comment.
So with that, we end the session. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming to Makeover Montgomery 5. And I want to thank the Center for Smart Growth for all the work that they've done, the Montgomery Planning Department, and thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a great weekend.
Really cool.